Do the Celtics have a problem when facing well-organized defensive teams? The loss to the Thunder wasn't just another tough game against a good team. It was a symptom of a bigger issue that could haunt the Celtics in the playoffs. When Boston faces teams with well-structured defenses, the team's offensive identity seems to dissolve. The game plan becomes predictable, plays lose their fluidity, and often the offense boils down to a barrage of three-point attempts, regardless of whether they're falling or not. Against the Thunder, this issue became even more evident. Boston attempted over 60 shots from beyond the arc, an absurd number given that the team clearly wasn't converting efficiently. The absence of Porziņģis only made things worse, as he is a crucial piece in the mid-range and the paint, capable of diversifying the offense and punishing packed defenses. However, this extreme reliance on a single player raises a troubling question. Are the Celtics truly prepared to face opponents who exploit this weakness? In the playoffs, opposing defenses have more time to study and capitalize on weaknesses. If a team knows Boston will live and die by the three-pointer, all it has to do is shut down the perimeter and force the Celtics into bad decisions. This strategy has worked against Boston in the past, and if nothing changes, it could be a problem again. Is the Celtics' offense versatile enough to handle defenses that adjust quickly? Or are we looking at a structural issue that could prove costly in the postseason? Can Jaylen Brown still be considered a franchise player after this season? Since signing the largest contract extension in NBA history, Jaylen Brown has been at the center of heated debates. His talent is undeniable, but the big question remains. Does he truly have the level of a player deserving of such a contract? Against the Thunder, Brown had a solid game, but far from a dominant one. His most memorable play was a spectacular dunk. But what about his real impact on the game? Was he able to change the course of the match? Looking at the other side of the court, the Thunder have Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, a player clearly superior to Brown and who doesn't cost his franchise nearly as much. Shai controls games, dictates the pace, scores consistently, and involves his teammates. Brown, on the other hand, still seems like an elite player, but functions better as a second option, a high-level second fiddle alongside Tatum. This raises an uncomfortable question for the Celtics' future. Was giving Brown this massive contract the right decision? Could the team have used that money to build a deeper roster and strengthen other positions? And if Brown is truly just an excellent, complementary star, should Boston have considered trading him for a player who fits better alongside Tatum? Is the Celtics' bench weak or just underutilized? Every time Boston faces a strong team, it feels like the rotation gets drastically shorter, and the bench players disappear. Against the Thunder, that happened again. Aside from Luke Kornet, who contributed well within his role, the rest of the bench had little real impact. Is this a roster problem, or is it about how Joe Mazzulla is using these players? Take Sam Hauser, for example. He has already proven to be an efficient sniper, but his effectiveness depends on rhythm and confidence. If he doesn't get consistent minutes, his game simply fades. Peyton Pritchard has flashes of talent and has been clutch in several games this season, but he struggles to sustain momentum over a prolonged stretch. Al Horford now coming off. The bench still plays a crucial role, but he can't carry the second unit alone. Boston's depth was one of its strengths at the beginning of the season, but is that depth being properly utilized? In the playoffs, relying solely on the starters won't be enough. Teams like Denver, Milwaukee, and even the Thunder know how to maximize their bench units. Boston, on the other hand, still seems hesitant to trust its reserves. Could this become a problem in a long series where the starters will inevitably need rest? Is officiating having too much influence on NBA games? One of the most controversial discussions this season has been the inconsistency of officiating. In the game against the Thunder, the disparity in free throws was glaring. OKC had over 23 attempts from the line, while Boston, once again, struggled to get favorable foul calls. This raises a bigger debate about how games are being controlled by referees and whether certain stars are receiving preferential treatment. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, for example, has become a master at drawing fouls and leads the NBA in free throw attempts. The issue isn't that he knows how to take advantage of the rules. That's part of the game. The real concern is the inconsistency. Why don't players like Tatum and Brown get the same calls? Why does the officiating standard change from game to game? This difference in treatment has a direct impact on game outcomes and could be a decisive factor in the playoffs. If some stars can generate easy points at the free throw line, while others have to fight for every basket, the competitive balance is compromised. Does the NBA need to review its officiating criteria, or do the Celtics need to adapt and learn how to play this political game? Within the league, is Joe Mazzulla capable of leading a championship team? Joe Mazzulla took over the Celtics under chaotic circumstances, but managed to lead the team to a strong regular season and the playoffs. However, as the level of competition rises, some of his decisions are starting to be questioned. Against the Thunder, his slow adjustments to defending the pick and roll were a major issue. OKC exploited this weakness multiple times, and Boston's response came too late. Additionally, his insistence on three-point shooting, even when it was clearly not working, raises doubts about his tactical flexibility. The best coaches in the NBA know when to change their game plan. Is Mazzulla showing that ability? In the playoffs, quick adjustments are essential. If a coach can't respond to an opponent's strategic changes, he puts his team at a disadvantage. So far, Mazzulla has shown potential, but does he have what it takes to win a championship? Or will the Celtics need a more experienced coach to truly dominate the league? Discard or opportunity? The Jaden Springer case and the Celtics' cold-blooded market moves. The NBA is a ruthless business, and Jaden Springer felt that firsthand. After spending almost a year as a forgotten piece at the end of the Celtics bench, he was unceremoniously thrown out of the franchise. And the worst part, it wasn't just a trade, it was a discard. Boston simply cleared its payroll, reduced taxes, and moved on without remorse. But what does this say about the franchise and its approach to young talent? Springer, just 22 years old, never had a real chance to prove himself in Boston. He wasn't a draft mistake by the team, but rather a mid-season acquisition who was quickly pushed to the fringes of the roster. An athletic prospect, strong defensively, with potential to develop, yet never given enough playing time to show if he could contribute. And when the trade moment came, at least Brad Stevens had the decency to inform him beforehand, which is the bare minimum, right? Brad gave me a heads up before it happened. I appreciate him for that. I'm grateful he brought me in. Let me be part of the championship team, said Springer, clearly trying to stay classy in a situation that couldn't have been more humiliating. The transaction itself couldn't have been colder. Springer was packaged alongside 2 second-round picks, 2030 and 2037, and sent to the Houston Rockets in exchange for a single 2031 pick. Yes, you read that right. Boston essentially paid to get rid of Springer and his modest $4 million contract. The justification? Reducing their second apron tax bill from $65.6 million to just $50.2 million. A pure accounting move. Nothing more. But what happened next made everything even more brutal. The Houston Rockets waived Springer just 24 hours later, without even giving him a chance. It was a double blow. First, the Celtics dumped him like an unwanted contract. Then Houston didn't even bother pretending they wanted him. Springer, now a free agent, was thrown into the NBA limbo, a place where once promising careers can vanish without a trace. And then, an old friend of the Celtics came into the picture, Danny Ainge, the former president of basketball operations. In Boston, now leading the Utah Jazz, saw something the Celtics didn't, or simply didn't care to. He offered Springer a 10-day contract, which turned into something more. Shortly after, the Jazz converted that temporary deal into a 3-year contract worth $5.6 million. From a cold calculated discard in Boston to a fresh start in Utah, Springer finally found a place where he can develop without the immediate pressure of proving his worth on a team obsessed with championships. The Jazz, in a rebuilding phase, need young players with potential, something the Celtics apparently didn't consider Springer to have. To make the irony even stronger, Springer reunited with Svi Mykhailiuk, another forgotten Celtics champion, who signed a 4-year deal with Utah last offseason. Does Boston really know how to develop young players, or is there a pattern of wasted talent emerging? Now, in a less toxic and more growth-friendly environment, Springer has already made 6 appearances for the Jazz, with modest stats but showing real progress. He's getting more playing time, has more freedom, and no longer has to look over his shoulder after every mistake, fearing he'll be forgotten again. Did Boston make the right decision in letting him go? Or did they fail to recognize potential, handing Utah a steal that could come back to haunt them? One thing is certain, in the NBA, stories like this tend to come back to bite franchises. If Springer develops into a solid player for the Jazz, this trade will be remembered as yet another example of Boston's impatience with young talent. And someday, the Celtics may have to pay the price for it.